Hello there! It's time to talk about the latest round of Star Trek Short Treks from CBS All Access. That's Short Trek Season 2, of which there are 6 entries. But first, we have to do this.
10, 9, 8,
Wouldn't
7,
want to spoil anything,
6,
would we?
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Rosebud is a sled.
Fire!
Spock beams aboard for his very first day of duty aboard the USS Enterprise.
Ensign Spock, reporting for duty.
No need to shout, Ensign Spock.
Spock and the ship's first officer, number 1, get stuck in an elevator together. That's a terrible first day. Spock and number 1 play 20 questions. Eventually, they escape from the elevator. The end. So this was fine. Very nice, cute. This is the kind of thing that we expect from the Short Treks brand, these nice little vignettes into the lives of particular characters. In this case, Spock's very first day aboard the Enterprise. And in this, we get a little more insight into number 1, Captain Pike, and Mr. Spock. This short trek is, perhaps, trying to bridge the gap between the Spock we know in the original series, who is our standard issue, emotionally self-repressed, logical first officer, and the Spock we meet in the very first pilot, the Cage, who is a little more free with his human emotions. Perhaps it takes some time for Spock to adhere to number 1's advice to, hide his freaky, if he ever wants to be in command. It is nice to see this interaction between these characters. In a way, they both kind of inhabit the same space on the Enterprise crew, emotionally and by rank. And that is exactly what this short trek is hinting at, that a sort of baton is being passed from one first officer to a future first officer. Additionally, it adds more dimension to the character of number 1. Even the show tunes theme gives us a taste of her command style, her likes and dislikes. Having her be in Discovery Season 2 has been a great decision so far. The Pike number 1 interactions illustrate very clearly how much fun the Enterprise bridge was before Kirk got there, and perhaps how much fun a Pike spin-off series would be. My biggest question about this short trek is, why didn't they just beam Spock and number 1 out of the elevator? As far as throwbacks and canon connections are concerned, one of the first things that stands out is the turbolift system, which indicates that Six Flags is manufacturing starship elevators in the 23rd century. This appears to be a version of the turbolift system we see in Season 2 of Discovery. And Q&A isn't the first time we get to see the modern Major General routine either.
I am the very model of a modern Major General. I've information, vegetable, animal, and mineral. No, I can't do
Yes,
this.
you can.
I cannot sing in front of people.
That was from an episode called Disaster from The Next Generation, where we also get characters stuck in a turbolift.
Then I shall appoint you my executive officer in charge of radishes. There.
These echoes are not an accident. However, there is no clue as to whether Six Flags is still manufacturing starship elevators in the 24th century. And you know what? We get to see Samora Smallwood as Lieutenant Ammon in this too, if only briefly. We've seen her previously in Discovery's second season as a member of the Enterprise crew. It's always nice to see a familiar face. The biggest takeaway for this short trek, as far as canon, is that number 1's name is still Una. Something that was established back in Discovery's second season. Number 1, famously, didn't have a name. Number 1 is her nickname, and that was established back in The Cage, the very first Star Trek pilot back in the 60s. Or is Una just a fancy way of saying number 1? We begin with an exterior shot of the USS Enterprise. Man, that's a good-looking ship. Captain Christopher Pike, hey Captain, lays down a new assignment for Lynn Lucero, who is taking command of the science vessel USS Cabot. First order of business on the new ship, staff meeting. Oh boy, my favorite. And here is Edward, the least likely Starfleet officer ever. Hi, my name is Edward, and I eat triples.
Although I have eaten one or two for research purposes.
Wait, how did this guy get through the academy? Out of a simmering resentment, Edward begins to sabotage Captain Lucero's command.
New boss, huh? Arf.
I think people like her.
No.
And Edward continues his work on genetically manipulating tribbles against the orders of his captain.
Personal issues aside, I just don't think you're the right fit for the kind of work we're doing here, so I've requested to have you transferred.
Yes, sir, Captain Lucero. That's how you handled this bonehead. The genetically modified tribbles begin to take over the ship. Who could have seen this coming? The population explosion begins to take a dangerous turn. It appears the ship may be destroyed by cuteness. The ship is doomed and the crew flees for their lives, and a new menace is released into the galaxy. Whew, where do I even begin with this one? This has to be one of the most un-Star Trek Star Treks that's ever trekked through the stars. And it all comes down to tone. The tone here is played completely for comedy, which is a little much for an action-adventure franchise that only sometimes turns it around for a quick laugh.
If shoe fits, wear it.
Mr. Chekhov.
But this is a short trek, and if we're going to see any experimentation with tone, it is here. So does it work? Maybe. But in doing so, it kind of undercuts the seriousness of much of the rest of the franchise. Edward, in particular, is the opposite of the Starfleet officer archetype we've come to know and love.
I'm not dumb.
His incompetence is completely unbelievable. And Captain Lucero seemed to have more options at her disposal in dealing with an unruly underling than what she actually exercised, right? After all, Starfleet Regulation 3, paragraph 12 says, in the event of imminent destruction, a captain is authorized to preserve the lives of his crew by any justifiable means. You know that one, right? No? Oh. It's just me, huh? What am I doing with this life? Since the short treks format is an experiment, what is the ultimate aim here? Maybe they want to test the audience to see if a Star Trek comedy series can be attempted? Boy, I hope not. This is my personal bias, but that would not be something that I'd be interested in. There's already a Star Trek-style comedy series out there. It's called The Orville. I'm not sure that I could stomach official Starfleet hijinks. Everything else here is neat. New ship, always cool. Visually, the episode meets the high standards set by Discovery. The actress who played Captain Lucero, Rosa Salazar, did very well in a series earlier in 2019 called Undone, a series worth watching. She makes a nice captain, too. And it's always nice to see Captain Pike. Hey, Captain. As far as canon connections go, we get to see the tribble again, or a variety of tribble. There appear to be two different scientific names for what we know as tribbles, Tribulestus ventricosus and Polygeminus grex. Personally, I think it is silly that humans of the future are using Latin to describe species that did not originate on Earth. They should be using other relatively extinct languages, like Sanskrit or Akkadian or Classical Nahuatl. Each evolutionary system should have its own specialized scientific language, leaving Latin just for Earth. But that aside, if we tried to explain this discrepancy away in-universe, then the explanation here is easy enough. Perhaps the science of biology is having a hard time narrowing down the evolutionary history of the tribble. Happens all the time here on Earth. For example, bobcats were once known as Felis rufus. Now, after some reconfiguring of phylogenetic trees, the bobcat's new name is Lynx rufus. This happens when we understand something better about an animal's evolutionary history, or when one scientist wins an argument over another. I know. It's riveting. Also, as long as we are talking about science, let's briefly mention how these genetically modified tribbles violate the laws of conservation of mass and energy. That's it, we're just mentioning it. In Star Trek land, physics gets broken all the time, and it got broke here. What else? Oh yeah. What the hell was this post-credits scene? Is this canon?
And only Tribbles has the taste kids love.
The episode opens with Cadet Tira Sidhu having a bad time. In the middle of Cadet Sidhu's bad time, she gets an added responsibility: a prisoner. Looks like the prisoner is none other than Captain Christopher Pike. Hey, Captain. Captain Pike begins working the situation to escape and describes the chaos outside. Turns out there's a ship under attack by the Tholians, the USS Bowman, which is where Cadet Sidhu's husband is serving.
My husband and I both applied for the Enterprise, but he got the Bowman and I wound up here.
Your husband.
But Sidhu isn't going to let a personal matter disrupt her dedication to duty. Things come to a head, the two disagreeing over regulations like lawyers, when we learn that the whole thing was just a test that Cadet Sidhu passed. Sidhu's reward? Serving aboard the Enterprise for her, work study? Do all captains administer that test personally? Aside from the obvious immoral psychological terror that Starfleet tests their cadets with, that episode was cool. We get to see Captain Pike, who again charms the screen and shows us what a tall, refreshing glass of Starfleet looks like. And this is the third short trek with Captain Pike in it, the second with Number 1 and Spock in it. So surely we're getting a Captain Pike series now, right? These 3 short treks, they're teasers, right, CBS? Overall, there are no complaints about this perfectly good short trek, apart from the previously mentioned psychological terrorism. It looked great, it sounded great, it's a nice, quick little vignette of a story, like an origin story for an upcoming character. The end was kind of obvious, but in a satisfying way. But it really does feel like a preview for an entire live-action series starring Captain Pike, Spock, Number 1, Lieutenant Ammon, and hopefully a Cadet Sidhu, played by Amrit Kaur, who was pretty great in this. So yeah, CBS, more of this, please. And give us a Pike series, you cowards! I'm really bad at this. As far as canon goes, the biggest connection here is the psychological terrorism test, or whatever this sort of test is called. We've seen it before for Wesley Crusher's Starfleet Academy entrance exam.
An excellent performance, Mr. Crusher.
That was the test.
Yes.
And with Counselor Troy's Bridge Officer's Test.
That's what this was all about, wasn't it? To see if I'd order someone to their death.
That's right.
Who designs these tests? Stanley Milgram? Several of the regulations mentioned in this short trek have a history. Regulation 191, Article 14 was previously mentioned in Voyager during the Equinox two-parter.
In a combat situation involving more than one ship, command falls to the vessel with tactical superiority. I looked it up this morning.
Good thinking.
Also from Voyager is Directive 10.
Directive 010. Before engaging alien species in battle, any and all attempts to make first contact and achieve non-military resolution must be made.
And the Reserve Activation Clause. Well, that was made famous in this scene from Star Trek The Motion Picture.
Your revered Admiral Nagura invoked a little-known, seldom used Reserve Activation Clause. In simpler language, Captain, they drafted me.
They didn't.
And I think that's it, unless you count these robots found previously in Discovery and in our next short trek. We open on a Mama Tardigrade looking for a suitable place to lay her eggs. There she is, the USS Enterprise. Nice. Mama Tardigrade attempts to get into the ship, presumably to lay her eggs aboard the Enterprise. Enterprise Dotbot, or just Dot, detects the Tardigrade and defends the ship. A chase ensues, just like the old days. Ephraim the Tardigrade manages to lay her eggs in the ship. But Dot is having none of it and kicks the tardigrade off the ship, separating the parent from the eggs. Using the mycelial network, our tardigrade protagonist attempts to reunite with her eggs. She gets close, and a fight between Dot and Ephraim flares up just as the Enterprise appears to go down. But then Dot realizes just what's been really going on and manages to save the tardigrade eggs. Clearly, this short trek is meant for younger kids. It's important to remember that when discussing and thinking about Ephraim and Dot. Ephraim is the right way to pronounce that, right? Basically, this was a kind of Looney Tunes-style, Star Trek-themed outing aimed directly at younger kids. It had all the hallmarks of a Bugs Bunny cartoon, violence, and an excellent score. The animation was pretty great. If the two upcoming animated Star Trek series look anything like this, then fantastic. Ephraim and Dot marks the first time we've seen any Star Trek in animated form in nearly half a century. You may have noticed who the director is. None other than Michael Giacchino, the composer for the recent Kelvin Timeline Star Trek films. Whatever you may feel about those films, the score is magnificent. Giacchino has scored several other films too, The Incredibles, Mission Impossible 3, and the Star Wars film Rogue One, among several other films and series. With Ephraim and Dot, Mr. Giacchino makes his directorial debut. As this is clearly meant for kids, it's best to ignore what appear to be canon violations in this short trek. Like, for example, that the tardigrade egg stayed put in the same space on the Enterprise for what appears to be as much as 20 years of time, even through a full-on retrofit of the ship. And the moments Ephraim was seeing aboard the Enterprise, which are taken from real original series episodes, those moments appear out of order from how they occurred in the original series. But that's linear thinking, and Ephraim operates on mycelial network time. And perhaps the most offending violation? In this short trek, the ship depicted crashing on the Genesis planet was the USS Enterprise NCC-1701A. If you'll remember, the ship in that moment in Star Trek III: The Search for Spock was actually the original Enterprise, before the A was manufactured.
No bloody A, B, C, or D.
Giacchino acknowledges this is an oversight, but we'll try to explain it away in true headcanon fashion in just a moment. These kinds of oversights may be enough to sour the moods of some hardcore fans. But you know what? If you want Star Trek to reach a new, younger audience, then you'll just have to overlook it. If I was 6 years old and saw something like this, I'd be hooked. This is the way.
This is the way.
This is the way.
The biggest thing we see are references to many classic episodes and films. Space Seed, The Naked Time, Who Mourns for Idoneus, The Doomsday Machine, The Tholian Web, The Savage Curtain, and 2 films, Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, and Star Trek III, The Search for Spock. We also get to see an M113 creature reference right at the top of the episode. Additionally, we get Kirk Thatcher's voice in the educational film opening of Ephraim and Dot. You remember Thatcher, right?
Excuse me. Do you mind stopping that noise?
And we get Jeanette Goldstein as the ship's computer, a role she played in the Q&A short trek too. Remember Miss Goldstein?
You look cool as one of 2 ships transporting a Lorian refugee.
Thought you might. And the USS Enterprise A thing? This is an oversight, unless this is some sort of setup for Discovery Season 3, like an in-universe kids cartoon aimed at children, say, 900 years in the future. At that distance of time, of course, some of the historic details would mutate or change or become confused with other details, right? Which leads to the question, is Ephraim and Dot a setup, somehow, for Discovery Season 3? Also, that deflector shield didn't deflect anything. We open with young Michael Burnham waking from a nightmare. Mr. Burnham calms Michael down by telling her the story of the girl who made the stars. The story describes an Earth devoid of stars in the night sky, and a first people that were terrified of a beast that stalked the night. When fields began to dry up, a young girl decided to try her luck against the beast of the night and the village law that forbade traveling at night. The beast appears to have cornered the young girl when something crashes down from space. The young girl runs to the object and finds an alien spaceship. The aliens are friendly and they give the young girl a gift, which she takes back to her village. The gift? The stars. And the village was never afraid again. Another animated short clearly aimed at a younger generation. And that's okay. Because you know what? Kids gotta trek, man. They gotta. Of all the short treks so far, this one seems the most out of left field. The story is fine, especially for a bedtime story for younger kids. But there wasn't much Star Trek in it, right? Except for the framing device of Michael Burnham and her dad, there isn't much here to suggest a Star Trek origin. Well, unless you count the motivating factor for the young girl in trying to help her village by using exploration, then yeah, there's some Trek in there. And of course, the story itself has already appeared in Star Trek. It is noteworthy that this short trek is based on the opening monologue of Discovery's Season 2 episode, Brother, which in turn may be based on an actual myth among the Ka'am-Abathwa tribe of Africa. What is probably happening here is that this is another entry as setup for Discovery Season 3. At least I hope that's what's happening. Canon connections and references are thin on the ground here. The alien the young girl meets appears to have a transparent skull, or is that a space helmet? If it is a transparent skull, then maybe this is a member of the Gallamite species, a species only referenced in dialogue so far.
The Gallamite? You're going out on a date with him?
Is something wrong with that?
No, not at all.
He happens to be brilliant. His brain is twice the size of yours and mine.
And no, I've seen it.
Also, did you notice this stuffed tardigrade? And it might be worth knowing that Michael Burnham's dad is played by Sonequa Martin Green's real-life husband, Kenrick Green, a role he reprises from Season 2. I don't think you should read too much into that. In the opening moments, we see two schoolgirls, Kima and Lil, with very different relationships to their respective parents. They board the shuttlecraft to go to school. Hey, that's school bus yellow, isn't it? Kima and Lil get off to a bad start. Kima misses the bus and is late to school on first contact day. Hey, why isn't that a holiday? A Vulcan principal? Oh boy. Lil continues to get Kima in trouble. Hey look, they have actual books in the future. Nice! More schoolyard-style antagonism leads to a fight. The girls get a timeout for their savage violence. Hey look, motivational posters. We had those in high school too. The simmering feud between Kima and Lil is eclipsed by an attack on Mars by unknown forces. The end? Now that we're back with live-action Trek, we find ourselves with a pair of children whose parents are connected to the Utopia Planitia shipyards over on Mars. Do note that this is an obvious setup for Picard Season 1, which is streaming right now. Overall, this is good. It's less of a complete story than previous short treks. It is meant as a teaser, really. But in that, it tells an interesting little tale about Kima and Lil and their terrible, horrible, no good, very bad day. Are these children connected to anyone important? Are their parents featured in the upcoming Picard series? Does this Mars attack feature into Picard's retirement? All good questions, which this short trek refuses to answer. One thing is for sure, Children of Mars absolutely discusses the September 11th attacks, using an attack on Earth's oldest colony, Mars, as a proxy. This sets up the world building for the new Picard series, which continues the 9/11 conversation in a variety of ways. For anyone old enough to remember these terrible days, the chaos of it, the confusion, the fear, especially those of us sitting in a classroom on that day, Children of Mars may stir up some difficult memories. The episode reveals that those attacking Mars are rogue synths. What does that mean? These are artificial life forms? Maybe even soon-type androids like Data or Lore? Does that mean that Starfleet, that people like Commander Bruce Maddox were successful in recreating Data, making a whole race of androids? And are those androids rebelling? We can't say until we actually finish watching the new Picard series. There is a clear 9/11 or modern terrorist attack vibe going on here. Doubtless that this is intentional to the Picard series as a whole. So what's going on here? A slave revolt? I mean, I guess that would be interesting.
Hell yeah.
The Picard series would be smart to continue the narrative of android and holographic rights. But nothing is set in stone here. We're just asking questions. And since everything about this short trek is connected to the new Picard series, we're just gonna say we liked it and move along. Hey look, you made it all the way to the end of this video. Nicely done. Here's 50 points. So if you like what you're seeing here, big giant in-depth video essays with a smattering of reviews and analysis of both Star Trek and other sci-fi properties, then consider supporting us on Patreon. Patreon is the best way to grow this channel, to help us make better edits with better music and better graphics, and especially to help us make more frequent video releases. As little as $1 to $2 a month can put us up to the next level. To all of those who already support us, thank you. If you like this and other video essays on this channel, then subscribe, turn on notifications, and especially sign up for our no-nonsense email list. The email list is the most efficient method. That's it. Look for future video essays here, as well as an end-of-season review for Picard's first season. Thank you. See you soon.
遠い将来を考えてみようよ。
Pike series, CBS. Captain Pike. You hear me, CBS? Pike.